this is why I really want to ask you, why did you start with the hoop dance, and how old have you been, and yeah, what happened to you that you really can say that you dedicated to the hoop dance?
Uh, yeah, I started when I was a teenager. I was probably about 13 or 14 years old, somewhere around there. And uh, I I was living in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I was going to this all native school, like an all Indigenous school, like with my peers. And we're in the city, right? So it was like a school in the middle of the city, but it was all for natives, right? Because our learning needs are a little bit different. Like a lot of times when our people go to a regular school, um, sometimes we don't always fit in. So it was nice to have an all native school where a lot of the people, a lot of my fellow students, were going through some of the same things as I was going through. A lot of our native people back home, we have a lot of challenges. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma. There's a lot of our people in poverty. Like we live in some of the poorest parts of the country, and you know, and so there's a lot of socioeconomic problems that go with that. So, anyways, I kind of grew up half on the res and half in the city. So, res is short for reservation. So, I kind of grew up half on the res and half in the city. So, kind of lived in the ghetto part of the city. So, you can imagine how it is in the ghetto. There's a lot of addictions problems and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of that growing up. But anyways, how I got introduced to hoop dance is I was going to this native school, and one of my bros, his name was Joe Chatsis. He was like one of my buddies, and we were in junior high at the time. I think I was around grade 7, grade 8, and we used to hang out. And so one day went over to my buddy's place, Joe, and he lived with his mom, and went to his house, and all of a sudden I seen a big pile of hoops in his house, and I was like, the first thing I thought is like, oh hey, you got a whole bunch of hula hoops here. Hey, are you? Free? I just thought like, because I never seen it, right? Because one thing you got to understand about Canada and the United States is the government tried to uh, assimilate us in an extreme way where they made it illegal for my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, made it illegal for us to practice culture and speak our language. Like they pretty much outlawed it at one time, and they tried to like strip it out of us. And they used to have a saying back in Canada is "kill the Indian and save the man." So they tried to kind of beat all that out of us. Especially the generation before me and my grandparents' generation, like they literally were abused and beaten because they weren't allowed to speak their language and practice their culture. And so, anyways, long story short, that's part of the reason why I didn't know any of that. I didn't grow up knowing that. I only The things I grew up seeing was stuff that kids shouldn't see. Like I seen a lot of traumatic things growing up, like everything from violence to substance abuse to even some physical abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds of things like that. And those things they say came as a result of the residential schools because that's how our people were treated, and so a lot of that dwindled down into our communities. So what happens to oppressed people? Well, they start oppressing other people. So, anyways, I don't mean to go so much into that, but you asked the question, so I just wanted to explain in case your audience members want to know a little bit about the backstory of why didn't I know this in the first place? Why didn't I grow up with it? Like why didn't I grow up in a healthy family? And so I'm the first in my generation to become a hoop dancer. So back to my story and how I discovered it is my buddy Joe. He had those hoops, And so I was curious. I was always curious. I was very curious as a kid, so I was always asking questions. So I asked Joe, I was like, "Hey, are these hula hoops?" First thing I did was this hoop, and I started to try to do the hula hoop, but I couldn't because I don't got that kind of rhythm. So he's like, "No, no, you're not for hula hooping. We don't do no hula hooping." And so he's like, "It's for hoop dancing." And I was like, "Oh yeah, oh, what's hoop dancing? I never seen what do you mean by hoop dancing? I had no clue what a hoop dancer was." So my buddy Joe, he took the time to show me. We had a couple laughs about it because I didn't know, and we're teenagers. We like to joke around and have a little fun. And so, anyways, he showed me a video of him hoop dancing, and I was like, wow, that's to me that was like magical. And so when I saw it, I was just super impressed. And then my buddy even took the time to show me like a couple little moves. Like he didn't like teach me how to dance right then and there in a spot, but he just like showed me some of the formations, like how to make the eagle, the flower, the butterfly, a couple little simple five hoop formations. And yeah, I was like, cool. It was to me, it was like learning a new magic trick. Uh, so I felt like I discovered like a new kind of magic trick, and it was cool. I was always into magic as a kid, and I like doing tricks, backflips off swings and stuff like that. I was kind of a little daredevil. I'd like to ride skateboards and ride my bike and all that stuff. So this was like a new kind of thing. It was cool. It was cool to me, and so that's kind of how I got introduced to it. And later on, Joe later became my roommate. He needed a place to live, so he moved in with me and my mom, and then he brought his hoops with him. So I used to just kind of play around with his hoops from time to time, and I learned a couple more things, and I just kind of got more and more into it. Like every time I saw his hoops, I'd pick them up and I'd be like, "Hey, bro, play around with your hoops for a little bit," and I would just practice and just play around with them. I had no intention of becoming a hoop dancer. I just liked to do it because it was fun and it was like a cool trick. It was like I was just trying to challenge myself a little bit. But eventually, my friend Joe he moved away. Like it was time for him to move on, so he moved away. He moved, and then he took his hoops with him. And then so when he took his hoops, I felt a sense of like loneliness. Like I was like, man, I want to continue doing this hoop stuff. So and I was poor, like a lot of our native people. Like I said, we live. A lot of us live in poverty. Like I grew up on welfare. Like my mom, although she tried to get a job, nobody would hire us natives because sometimes they're racist. Like, a lot of times they're still racist unless natives. Like my mom got discriminated against. Like nobody would hire her because she's native, and like that's a whole nother story in itself. But anyways, we were poor. Didn't have a lot of resources. And back in those days too, they didn't really have a lot of the materials easily available like they do today. Like I'm talking like way back in the day, we didn't even have internet. Like internet wasn't even invented yet. Like when I started doing this journey. So, anyways, uh, so after a while when Joe was gone, I just had an urge to continue on hoop dancing. Like it was like an itch I needed to scratch kind of thing, and so I was like, I wanted some hoops, so I was searching for some. I would go look and see in the store, see if I could buy a hula hoop or something like that, and I didn't know how to make them, so I couldn't find any material, and and my resources were limited. So one day I saw this old garden hose in the yard, and it was just sitting there. So I was like, oh yeah, maybe I can make some hoops out of those. So out of desperation, I cut up this old garden hose and I made some hoops. And then I started practicing again and with garden hose hoops. And I didn't have anything to decorate them. I just had some masking tape, and so I wrapped them in masking tape just to kind of make them a little bit prettier. And then I would just practice and play around with them. And I made myself, I think, a set of like 8 hoops, and I was just kind of messing around with them, and I'd play around with them. And yeah, Then eventually my mom, she noticed that I was practicing hoop dancing, and she kind of noticed. So every time she would have friends over or somebody come visit, she'd be like, "Oh hey," she'd be like, "Hey, my son, he knows how to do this hoop dance." And so they put on a powwow tape. Back then we had powwow tapes. We had to play tapes. We didn't have the technology that we had. So back in the day, you used to have to play a tape. So I'd be in the living room with my hoops. My mom would want to show me off to her friends, and because uh, I think she was like surprised that I could do this, and she wanted to show her friends, and they enjoyed it too. And prior to that, like me hoop dancing, I wasn't on a good path because I used to get in trouble a lot. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, you kind of get into trouble. If you're misguided. Like I didn't have a father growing up either, so I didn't have a lot of I didn't have a lot of resources as a kid. So a lot of times I would hang out with other kids like myself, and we would get into trouble. Like we would get into trouble for vandalizing things or doing something we weren't supposed to. And so in a way, hoop dancing kind of took me away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. I was just like my tears are running the whole time. I really just like I'm just so grateful that you share so honest your story. And like for me, it sounds like really the hoops did calling you. Yeah, of course, the ancestors did call you, but through the hoops, you could listen to the call. Yeah, you could yeah, listen and feel the call that you have to do this, that you have to go into this natural, real circle of life. So that's really beautiful, and I really love the true ways of life. I don't like,
yeah,
like everything is so nice and blah blah blah. No, let us talk about the truth, yeah, because we are living here in a world which is rough sometimes, and we have to look that we do the best of it. And yeah, the hoops, they saved your life. Yeah, they really saved your life. And
oh
the
yeah.
only thing is, when did you started like professional with the hoop dance? Who taught you this?
A lot of the stuff I had to learn on my own. So it just came a gradual, progressive thing. Because around the time I started learning hoop dancing, I was still kind of caught between living in the ghetto and living that lifestyle and kind of getting into trouble. Like uh, I used to get in trouble with the law too, and so one time it got so bad that I got arrested and put in jail. And that's the thing about Indigenous peoples. We have a high population of Indigenous people that are in the prison system. So even at 14 years old, I got put in jail. They have juvenile prisons. Well, they don't have them anymore in Canada, but they used to have them back when I was a kid, which is kind of disappointing now that I'm an adult. I'm like, man, you kids, oh man, you don't even know. Like nowadays, they're a lot softer on them. Like they put them in group homes, or they got more programming for them, which is good, which is good. But I'm like, I'm like kind of disappointed that they don't get to go through the hard stuff that I went through. But anyways, uh, I went to jail at about 14 years old, and while I was in there, I really thought about my freedom, and this hoop dance thing was in my mind. And I just thought to myself, and I prayed to the Creator, and I hated it in there, and it was so traumatized being in there, like so embarrassing, and it was like so restricting. And then I would look out the window every day, and I'd think about what I want to do with my life, and I just thought of, I was like, man, if I once I get out of here, I don't ever want to be in this place ever again. I want to do something for myself. I want to do something for my life. I want to do something better than what I was doing. So that jail experience, I was in there for about a month, and it really smartened me up, and it really made me think about my life and what I could do. So I took life a little bit more seriously, and that's when I started to take hoop dancing more seriously. And as soon as I got out, we moved back to the res, and I got to work on myself. I started to work on myself and practice, commit myself more to the hoop dancing, and and I was still kind of, I was like really poor still, so I didn't really have a lot of resources. But uh, even my first outfit, I had to sew it all by hand, and I had to figure it out all on my own. Didn't really have a teacher. Like, we were so poor that even the poor people on the res said that we were poor because we didn't even have a vehicle, man. We didn't have a car or anything. So I didn't have a lot of resources, a lot of money. So I had to make do with what I had, and so my official first set of hoops, they came from the res dump. You know, to be honest with you, found some old tubing, like some household. Oh, sorry, sorry, I got cut off there for a second. Um, yeah, we had some. I found one of my relatives found some materials that I can make hoops with. Somebody just threw it out. Like, a lot of people joke about the res dump back home because a lot of times we go shopping there whenever we need something. Yeah, and you just go find materials you can reuse there. So it's kind of cool that way. But it's kind of funny at the same time. But that's where I got my first hoops though, from the res dump, and I was able to make better hoops, better than the garden hose ones that I had. And so then I took it more seriously, and that's when I began my journey to become a hoop dancer. And it all started just from myself practicing all the time, and then I was hand stitching my outfit. It wasn't pretty or anything, but it was functional, is what I needed, and I made it myself. It was handmade. Wasn't the nicest looking outfit, and I remember one of my aunties felt sorry for me. Like, she was like an experienced sewer and powwow person. She's like, "Oh, you gotta throw that crap away, Dallas. I'm gonna make you something really nice. I'm gonna make you a really nice outfit." So I was like, really? I was like, right on, auntie. Thank you so much. And yeah, so I basically rose out of poverty with it, though. Like, I still had my struggles at school and whatever. Like, I was still struggling at school because I used to get bullied a lot too. So I was dealing with a lot of things growing up. Like, not only was I dealing with the other things like my that I got in trouble for, but also at school I wasn't really accepted because I'm a mixed native, right? So on the res, people tease me for being a little bit too white looking, but in the city, like, I'm like the native guy. Like, white people bug me because I'm like more native looking, right? So it's kind of like I don't fit in. I kind of get bullied in both sides, right? So that's where I get these green eyes from, by the way. I'm kind of a half breed, but I mostly grew up native my whole life. But yeah, that's kind of how I started my journey in hoop dancing, and it was a long journey though. It took a lot of years before I got really good enough to perform in front of audiences, and uh, thankfully, my mother got me initiated into the Pow Wow Circle.
Wow.
Like, I'm really grateful for what my mom did for me a long time ago. Like, she got an elder to bless me. Like, they had this whole initiation ceremony for me and everything. It was like one of the greatest days of my life. I remember I was like 15, 16 years old, and I got initiated into the Pow Wow Circle. Northern Cree was the drum that actually was there at the time. They weren't as big as they are now. Like, they were still pretty big back in those days. Like, this is back in the 90s I'm talking about, like maybe 94 I think I got initiated. So it was that far back. I got initiated into the Pow Circle, and I remember that summer. It was like one of the greatest summers ever because I got to tour in the Pow Trail after that. Like, even that had its own challenges. Like, a lot of times I would, like, um, you might call it hitchhiking, but I call it catching a ride in the powwows. I would just catch a ride with friends and whatever, and find a way to get to powwows, and I would chip in gas money here and there, and you know, a lot of times when I was hoop dancing, whenever I go to powwows, they put out a blanket for me, so it would help me pay
Mm.
for some of my expenses. And I was able to grow that way, though. I was able to learn and grow, and I later on became a fancy dancer too. So I did other dances. So that's kind of a little bit about the backstory and how I got into it, and it took a lot of years. It pretty much took me like 10 years before I considered myself to be a professional at hoop dancing. Like, but I'm grateful for hoop dancing though, because it saved my life. It changed my life forever. It brought a lot of healing to my life. I went from actually being a high school dropout to I ended up going back to college. I got closer to culture. I got closer to ceremony, and it brought a lot of good things out of me. And I'm really grateful for those things because of hoop dancing, I was able to go get a college diploma. Like I got three college diplomas now. Like, and I'm on the cusp of getting my degree. Like so, it's brought a lot of great things out of me. Like you know, if it wasn't for hoop dancing, I probably would have ended up in jail or on the streets. Like a lot of our people end up on the streets or dead. So just to be blunt with you, hoop dancing really saved my life, and it brought me opportunity, open up opportunities to the world for me. It gave me opportunities to travel the world. Like I've been to Germany. I've been
Oh,
to
really?
Germany. Yeah. Went to the Frankfurt Book Fair back in 2022. I've been to Holland 5 or 6 times. I used to live in Spain, actually. I was part of a dance troupe over there. I've been to Asia a few times. I've been to Central America. Been to Norway. I've been to Oslo, Norway. And that's the opportunities that happens. When you follow your dream, then all those opportunities present themselves. So I'm grateful for that. Like dancing gave me the courage and the confidence and the wisdom to be anything I want to be in life, and that's what I'm grateful for. And now I've managed to break the cycle in my kids' generation because my son's a hoop dancer. He didn't have to endure any of the hardships that I did. Like, I wasn't always the best father, or at least he didn't experience a lot of the abuses that I did as a kid. Uh, and and I was able to pass on the hoop dance to him, and now he's a second generation hoop dancer, and he goes out there and performs and does the hoop dance all over the place. Like he's got opportunities galore, and even the lucky bugger, he's even got nice outfits. Like I give him a lot of my old outfits. Lucky kid, he's kind of spoiled that way. Like he didn't even have to make his own hoops. Like I did all that for him, and even the routine that he does, like he inherited that from me. He inherited it. But I'm grateful though to provide that for my children and break that cycle, in a big way because he didn't have to go through a lot of the crap that I went through. And same thing with my daughter. I'm really happy and proud of my daughter. Like she's on her fourth year of university. She's an elite athlete. She plays lacrosse, hockey, soccer, and she travels the country. She has a good job, and she's also a dancer too. She dances fancy. She's
Oh,
interested in learning hoop dancing. I've taught them along the way, but I've never really forced it upon my kids. So I've always left them the option, and and my kids know that I love them, and I'm also a proud grandpa. My son has kids, so in our language, we call it mushum. So I'm a mushum. I'm a grandpa. I have three grandchildren now. So
wow.
I know I don't look that old. I'm 46 now, but I'm a young grandpa, and I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be a mushum. So hopefully that sums up the story. Like if anybody wants to learn more about my story, they can go onto my Facebook page. I got a lot of Facebook live videos. I got a YouTube page. I've got my website www.dallasarcand.ca. I've also got a book coming out too. It's called 13 Hoops: Life's Lessons Lived and Learned, an Indigenous Contemporary Interpretation of the World through the Eyes of a World Champion Hoop Dancer. So that book will be out in a couple months, actually.
Dallas, I really, I feel so honored and I'm so happy that you share so honest your story. For me, you are just like a symbol that everything is possible, doesn't matter where you are coming from, and doesn't matter what happens to you, doesn't matter how many trauma is there. If we make the decision to go out of it, there is the possibility. So for me, you are just a shiny butterfly, you know, like really just spread your wings and just show the love and the beauty that you are and the strength that you are to the world. Give this to the children and give this to the people, give this to your people. For me, actually, there is no separation. You are, for me, a human being. Every person here on earth is a human being, and we all have a heart and we all have blood inside our veins. And just I'm just so happy that you are so honest, and I can just say thank you for your being. And all your links that you have, I really want to put them below my video, below this podcast. So
Thank you so much. All right, we'll see you guys. Have a good day.